with the number and diversity of alien species in Star Wars, it's not surprising that some would be, at least from our perspective, a little less optimized for the role of Jedi Knight. Just spitballing here, we know that there were Hutt Jedi. You think the Hutts could struggle based on their limited mobility, although there's some evidence that Jabba was a particularly fat and lazy Hutt, and others can actually move at a decent clip. In Star Wars Legends, we have Ode Benar. He was a Nettie, basically a tree. And we also hear of Dwayne Wogan Jedi, which is less impractical, but more just unique, given that they were pretty much massive dragons. You actually hear about them in the Thrawn trilogy. And beyond that, from Jawas to Ewoks, there are any number of what some might call impractical Jedi. However, there is one specific species and actually type of Jedi that I think is goofier than the rest of them, and that is the Iron Knight. Now, as far as I'm aware, the Iron Knight first appeared in the Star Wars Missions series, which was a pretty unique sort of book-based RPG. You sort of read along the book, and you've got a dice that you roll as you play. Pretty cool. Anyway, book 14 is called The Monsters of Dweem. It's by Dave Wolverton, who, by the way, sadly passed away about a year and a half, famous for the courtship of Princess Leia within the Star Wars fandom. The story starts off with Luke, Han, and Leia having recently escaped Nikto pirates. They're being hunted by a droid Grand Moff 48C. He's like an IG-88 unit, and if you think a droid sort of operating in a role that people usually operate is weird, well, keep listening. Anyway, in the RPG, you play as an Imperial, which is kind of unique, and you go to the planet Dweem, which, unbeknownst to anyone, contains an old Republic military base. Now, keep in mind, this book was written in 98, so no one really knew what the old Republic was. Also, by the way, the Dweemans are these spiders on the planet Dweem, and they seem very similar to like every version of the ice spiders that Star Wars has always used. But as they progress within the base, they discover, and I quote, an enormous droid of ancient design. It is wearing a coat of interlocked plates of armor, and on its head is a helm with 3 horns. It draws an oversized lightsaber that glows purple in its metal hand. It crouches, ready to attack. It's revealed that this thing, which is an Iron Knight, has been guarding this part of the base for over 60 years. The Imperial character basically decides to abandon the base. How is sort of up to the player. It's one of those almost choose your own adventure sections. But what's clear is that the Iron Knights are dangerous, and there's a bunch of them as well. In the book, they're very clearly called droids. However, that would be somewhat changed by later lore. For example, in the New Essential Guide to Warfare, Iron Knights are described as a strange band of force-sensitive cyborgs in droid bodies, and the basic idea is that the thing powering the cyborg or the droid is a crystal. It's definitely different than their first appearance, again, where they're treated more like automata, but anyway, there's more than just that. The New Essential Guide to Droids actually really fleshes out the lore around these guys and changes a lot as well. They also end off the book, which is kind of funny. Anyway, it explains that on the planet Orax, there's what's known as the Shard, which it describes as an intelligent crystalline species, basically a smart rock. And no, this isn't the only time Star Wars would involve rocks in the Force, other than, of course, the Yoda statement. There was also the Sill, sometimes known as the Spook Crystals, on Nom Chorios, as we see in the Callista trilogy. Despite the fact that shards, and I quote, fail most definitions of life, they are undeniably intelligent. How this could be proven when they're in rock form, I don't really know, but somehow shards found their way off-world inside the body of old battle droids. Not B1 battle droids, at least not necessarily, though that's certainly possible, but we learned specifically that they fit into ancient Juggernaut droids, what are known as Fletch droids, and more. They don't, however, take over the body of rusted out or useless droids. Rather, they more can be seen as pairing with the personalities which already exist in droids, and I think that bit of lore is meant to sort of explain how they act in their first appearance. Anyway, at least some of these beings were force sensitive, which brings us to the story of Aquinos, who agreed to train several shards. And funny enough, if you're wondering, yes, the shards did use other shards, dead ones specifically, to power their lightsabers. The Jedi Council didn't find this especially Gucci. In fact, they saw the shards as against the principles of the Force, given that they were not living. How they controlled the Force without midichlorians historians? I don't know, but somehow they did. Anyway, this group of shards would actually prove themselves during the Arcanian crisis, but it's explained that there were still extreme prejudices from not only the Jedi Council, but the whole Order, and the shards and their master chose to move to the planet Dweeb, as we mentioned before, where they were found later after the Battle of Endor. Now, the nice thing about that was that, hey, they survived Order 66. I don't think anyone was looking for them, and in fact, when Luke Skywalker created his new Jedi Order, the Iron Knights were accepted. Luke didn't have the same prejudices, and in fact, they were very successful, especially during the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. For those who don't know, the Yuuzhan Vong hate everything artificial. They hate the Jedi, so the Iron Knights would have been something that would have driven them mad almost beyond comprehension. Many, however, were killed during the war. It says only a handful remained, and one, Luxem, even fell to the dark side of the Force. These rocks are absolutely wild and out. But I mean, that's all I really have here. These guys appeared mostly in the background. The late 90s definitely was really interested in Star Wars droid. There was the droid rebellion, that idea, which propped up a lot in Star Wars Legends. There was the IG-88 story called Therefore I Am, which is quite famous maybe. It talks about IG-88 splitting off into different personalities and almost taking over the Death Star. Well, really, he does take it over. There's also this cool droid arc from the Star Wars Republic series where Ki-Adi-Mundi is hunted by a droid, which actually looks nothing like its cover appearance, which is a shame because I think it's kind of creepy, but he actually kind of gets his ass kicked. This droid, by the way, is the Fletch model that I mentioned earlier. It's like a souped up battle droid. At some point, I'll probably need to do an entire lore video on it, but that's all I've got for now. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. What do you think of these really strange type of Jedi? Should they stick to more what we see in the prequels, where there's certainly a diversity of species, but, you know, they're mostly humanoid, mostly what you'd expect warriors to be? Or is it cool that, you know, the philosopher Jedi is kind of just a tree? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on all of this and more down below.